What's going on YouTube? It is Reaples back in another video. In today's video we have another Chelsea news video. There was a lot that kicked off today. I mean, there's at least 20 things I'm talking about today most likely. So yeah, let's just I guess jump straight into it because there's so much to cover with a lot of outgoings, but some potential incomings also being talked about today as well, and some fresh ones, some new ones, and ones that I want to voice my opinion on. So let's just jump straight into it, beginning with Nicholas Jackson potentially to Manchester United. Simon Phillips said that Man United are monitoring the situation of Nicholas Jackson as he weighs up his future for Chelsea, or weighs up his future after Chelsea's summer spending spree, which included the acquisition of two strikers in Liam Delap and João Pedro. Ben Jacobs, said that Nicholas Jackson, another name considered by Villa alongside Garnacho. However, Chelsea are not forcing Jackson out, but they could consider bids. Meanwhile, Chelsea retained an interest in Morgan Rogers, even though Villa considered him untouchable, which is something that I'm going to talk about later in this video about Morgan Rogers, Nicholas Jackson. Fabrizio says that Nicholas Jackson is attracting lots of interest from England and European clubs, and this was the full quote, that Nicholas Jackson is attracting a lot of interest in England. It's almost impossible for AC Milan financially, but there's other interest in Europe. Chelsea doesn't want to sell, but if there's a good proposal, then he could go. This is Ben Jacobs talking about Garnacho, but as you can see, Nicholas Jackson, another name considered by Villa. Chelsea are not forcing Jackson out, but can consider bids. Meanwhile, Chelsea retain an interest in Morgan Rogers, even though Villa consider him untouchable. Jackson has also been discussed by Milan and Manchester United. No formal approach from either club to date. Then Fabrizio said that several clubs have started to move for Nicholas Jackson as his exit from Chelsea remains possible this summer. AC Milan deal currently off price too high and no intention to proceed. However, there are Premier League clubs making initial approaches. My stance on Nicholas Jackson is if you get substantial money that you just can't simply say no to, then by all means let him go. I don't think you should force him out the club. I think he's good enough to be a second or third striker. Obviously, João Pedro can play across the entire attack, so you could argue that Jackson would be our number 2 striker behind Liam Delap next season, and João Pedro would rotate at that number 9 position, but also play left wing, also play the 10, also play right wing if needed, but I doubt. But yeah, I think Nicholas Jackson's a very serviceable player at this club, and I think he'd be one of the best backups in the league. But at the same time, it's up to Nicholas Jackson to determine if he wants to be a backup or not. He definitely needs to work on his shooting technique and his shot power if he really wants to stay at Chelsea and be a stable number 9. But I do think he's one of the best bridge 9s in the league, and what I mean by bridge is he can bring your project back up to a Champions League spot, a Europa League spot, but he's not gonna make you a title challenging number 9. But I do think that is very valuable for teams that are around that mid-table to higher table, in like that 7th to pretty much like 15th spot. I think any one of those clubs would take a swing at Nicholas Jackson. You can see Villa do it. We've already talked about that. I think Manchester United would be a perfect move for them, not a perfect move for Nicholas Jackson though. I think he'd be good enough to bridge them back to where they're used to being. He could probably get them back to somewhere near the mid-table, somewhere near the 8th spot, maybe getting Conference League or something like that in the next season after this, if he does end up going there. For Villa, I think it's his best career move. I think he was good under Unai Emery, who is obviously the Villa manager. But I do think Villa is an exciting project, and I think if he goes there, then you could definitely see something happen on the front of Morgan Rogers, which is about to be talked about. But Max London's first, who is also just CFC Pie, said that Nicholas Jackson can leave for bids of £60 million plus, or if player pushes like Nani Madueke. Chelsea ideally want to keep Jackson, which I think is a smart approach. I don't think we should be actively looking to shop him, because at the end of the day, that's just going to bring his price down. So, why would you really do that when it's a player that you could get 60-70 million from pretty easily, especially for clubs that are desperate for strikers, which a lot are. We know that. This market is very striker needy. A lot of teams are just in desperate need of a striker, and I think Nicholas Jackson could be a serviceable option for a lot of teams. So at some point you just gotta stick with your gut and raise that price up, which is why it's at £60 million plus. But I expect there to be a bidding war, to be honest. But I do think we end up shipping him off to Villa if he does leave the club for this reason in particular. Matt Law is saying that he's told by people on the outside that if Aston Villa do go for Nicholas Jackson, it will immediately trigger a bid for Morgan Rogers from Chelsea. Obviously, we know Villa aren't the richest club. They do have some PSR problems alongside Newcastle, who are still in for Ekatike. That's one of the crazy sagas of the summer, I think. Liverpool pretty much backed him into a corner and said, choose keeping Isak or getting Ekatike and selling us Isak. And Newcastle have pretty much gone, you're not going to checkmate me. We're just going to go in for Ekatike, and we're also going to keep Isak, and you may not get either. But if you do, we're just keeping Isak altogether. But yeah, Villa do have PSR problems. And if Nicholas Jackson does go there, I think, they're going to need to sell. They already do need to sell, but I think, Chelsea could be that club that comes in for Morgan Rogers. Pays a substantial fee. Obviously, they didn't sign him for much from Middlesbrough, but he's one of the most exciting and one of the most talented players in the league, and I would absolutely love him at Chelsea, no questions asked. Yeah, I'd take Morgan Rogers in a heartbeat. I think most of y'all know this if you've watched any of my videos. I absolutely love the ball carrying of Morgan Rogers, and I also love the versatility of Morgan Rogers. I think he could, be a good player at anywhere over in the field. Obviously, just not the defense. I think he could play midfield if he wanted to, alongside Caicedo. Obviously, not spreading the ball out very well, but being able to carry that ball through the defense to the midfield to the attack, I think is something that he's excellent at. I think that's his best attribute easily. One of the best ball carriers in the league easily, if not the best. So yeah, I love Morgan Rogers as a player, and if they pay the money that they do for Nicholas Jackson, let's say it ends up being 70, we can just turn around and say, hey, you pretty much can get 70 from us as well for Morgan Rogers, and I think that's a deal that we should look to explore, and I'm happy to see the links are continuing with Morgan Rogers because he's one of my favorite players. I'd definitely buy his jersey if he does come here, which I kind of expect to happen. I do think Morgan Rogers is next on Chelsea's hit list. Obviously, we are in for City Academy boys, and Morgan Rogers is that, but I think the door is only open if we sell Nicholas Jackson to Aston Villa, so I think we are exploring that possibility just to potentially get Morgan Rogers, which I think would, be the better side of that swap deal pretty much if Rogers and Jackson go separate ways to, separate clubs in Chelsea and Villa. Moving on, though, to Petravvic is now going to Bournemouth officially. We talked about the here we go. I think it was yesterday in the news video, but it's now official. He has joined Bournemouth, $25 million pound package, not dollar, excuse me. Yeah, £25 million package for Petravvic to go to Bournemouth on a permanent deal. I wish him well. I don't think he really put a foot wrong at the club. I don't think he did anything drastic. I don't think he did anything amazing either. So we make a huge profit. Obviously, been on the books for 2 years. We spent, I think, 14 million on him. And we're selling him for 25, so fair enough for getting all that profit in the books on Chelsea's account. Obviously, I would have liked Petravvic to stay and compete to be the number one. Obviously, Sanchez looked great against PSG, but I don't think that really mattered. I would have liked Petravvic to fight for that spot coming back from loan at Strasbourg, obviously, which another one of our goalkeepers is about to do, which I talked about yesterday as well. But Chelsea just didn't guarantee him the game time that he wanted, so, he departs off to Bournemouth for £25 million. So, just cash in, to be honest. Player doesn't want to be here, you just cash in. Happened with Petravvic, happened with Madueke, and now can potentially happen with Nicholas Jackson. And potentially more outgoings, which we will talk about. Mr. Dom Smith said that reasonable offers will be considered for KDH, but the former Leicester midfielder has not been transfer listed. A decision may be taken to send Tyreek George out on loan, though he could also yet stay with the first team squad. Other than that, another potential outgoing, Christopher Nkunku, who featured during the Blues' successful Club World Cup campaign, is still expected to depart this summer. He was previously offered to Manchester United in a player swap for a human being that did not go through. I'd like to keep KDH just being a role player. I think he's pretty happy being a squad player here and, just embracing that role, getting the game time that's offered to him and, putting in all the effort that he can when, he does get that game time. And Nkunku looked great in the Club World Cup. Yeah, I think his value definitely went up there at the Club World Cup, but I do still kind of expect us to sell him. But if he does stay, I wouldn't really be all too mad at that. I just hope, we get a pretty substantial fee for him, just so there is a profit on the books, because obviously we paid, I think, 52 million to Leipzig for him, which was considered a steal at that time. he was an incredible player coming from Leipzig. It just, those injuries really derailed his Chelsea career. It's really just a what could have been if injuries weren't a thing. But, I do expect him to leave. I do think he's probably off to Bayern Munich with Renato Vega potentially as well. Um, so yeah, maybe some, a lot more money coming in on the books for, these two players in Nkunku and KDH. But um, Patty said that Chelsea wants to keep KDH for the upcoming season, up to the player to make a decision, which I agree with. I think, if he does want to stay, then we should just keep him. I think Maresca trusts him enough to get some valuable minutes and play in situations where we just need to shut the game down. We can put a midfielder at the winger position, and I think KDH is perfect for that. Excuse me. But yeah, it's up to him to make the decision of if he wants to just remain a Chelsea player or does he want to go and play actual first team football on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis. So yeah, I think it's respectful for the club to just ask KDH's permission, but I do think it's the right thing to do to keep him around just because of the trust that Maresca has for him, getting valuable minutes and seeing out close games. Obviously, we paid a pretty substantial fee for how much he actually does play, excuse me, but I still would actually like him to stay. And if we do get a bid near his or near the amount we did end up paying for him, then I would ship him out. But other than that, I just would like KDH to stay to be a role player. Other than that, we did have Matt Law talk about Trevor Chalobah today, which I actually really liked what he had to say. That there's definitely still some interest in Napoli or from Napoli in Trevor Chalobah. I still think that there might be bids that Chelsea think about, but it is a lot different than previously. They're certainly not putting him around. They're certainly not saying he's for sale. They're certainly not encouraging bids, which I think is the right way to go about it. I think he's been very consistent in his time at Chelsea, and I think he's getting better match day by match day. But yeah, I do think we should keep him around. Sorry, I was trying to find my words. Yeah, I do think we should keep him around. I do think he's a serviceable enough center half to start games as well as come off the bench in games if we do sign a new center half, which was talked about today. And I think it's gonna end up being Hato who can be a backup but also start if need be at center half or play at left back if need be too. But yeah, I would keep Trevor Chalobah. I don't think we should really be looking to sell him. Obviously, a Cobham boy, I think most of the fan base isn't really going to want him to go. He's very professional in the way he's gone about his time at the club, even when we did try to ship him out. But it seems like he's staying, and I'm more than happy for him to stay because his performances have consistently been getting better. So, it seems like Trevor Chalobah is in line to stay, which I completely agree with, but could, reunite with, or did he play under Antonio Conte? Maybe he played, I don't know. He may have played 1 year under Antonio Conte. I don't know for sure. Maybe it was his first year that he played that Antonio Conte was Chelsea manager or not. But I do think so. Or was that Frankie Lampard when Trevor Chalobah came through? I don't know. But yeah, could, go to Italy with Conte, especially if they bet a substantial amount of money. I do think, it'd be the right thing if Napoli come in with like 45 to 50 million that Chelsea are like, all right, at this point we kind of just take the money here and we can go reinvest that in a new center half. But yeah, I do want him to stay at the club, and I think his performances have been getting better, so I do not think we should put him on the transfer list or really even consider bids unless they're very substantial. But that's that on Trevor Chalobah. On Garnacho Chukwuemeka, Borussia Dortmund just can't afford it, so it's stuck a little bit. So I kind of expect him to go back out on loan there next season, and then they'll come in for Chukwuemeka the season afterward. But I do think Chukwuemeka is a very tidy player, and I think Borussia Dortmund know that. I don't think they want to lose the player, but they do need to raise funds to go in for him. Obviously, Joe Bellingham was their reinvestment, but I expect, if they do let someone go, that Garnacho Chukwuemeka is the next one through the door. Other than that, we have, the person that I hate talking about to Chelsea. Yeah, Chelsea are aware of the situation of Alejandro Garnacho as he has to leave Man United. There's internal discussions of which Garnacho is one. Yeah, I'm not really going to talk about this all too much. I just hope it's a smokescreen. The links don't go away, which really annoys me. But yeah, we're aware of the situation. Obviously, he does or he's going to be forced out of Man United regardless. But I just hope we don't go in for him. I don't like the player, and I don't like all the baggage and the attitude that comes with him. So, I hope we don't go for him. And I'm only talking about this because Fabrizio reported it, but I think it's just one of the names on our list, which was confirmed here that Chelsea could have one more addition up front. Garnacho remains an option, says Fabrizio. But yeah, I don't expect Garnacho to really come through the door. Sorry, something just came up, but yeah, I don't expect Garnacho to come through the door. I think if there is one more addition up front, then it is going to be Morgan Rogers, or the guy that we're going to talk about right now, which I would much rather bring him through the door than Garnacho, and I think they'd be similar prices. Simon Phillips says with an exclusive that Chelsea hold talks with agents of Crystal Palace star man. In the article, it talks about Chelsea contacting Everich as his agents. Which I would be more than happy to bring through. I think he can play across the entire front four and be very effective at every single one of those positions. If you need him at the right, he can play on the right. If you need him on the left, he can play on the left. He can play false nine if you need him to. He can play the 10 to back up Palmer as well. So yeah, this is a signing that yeah, this is a signing that I would really be in favor of just because of his positional versatility. Seems like Eze will head off to Arsenal most likely, which good deal for them. But if they do lose out on Eze and Rodrigo and only get Madueke, yeah, I think that'd be hilarious to the rest of the fans globally. But yeah, it seems like Eze is pretty much off to Arsenal at this point. But I'm glad that we are talking with his agents, potentially doing a deal. But I don't expect him to come through the door just because he's 27, doesn't really fit the mold that we've talked about. But if he does, then I'm more than happy to bring him through. Obviously, does have a release clause, I believe, of like 60 million pounds that clubs are waiting, or Crystal Palace is waiting for other clubs to activate. But I just don't expect that to be Chelsea. Although I do, really like the link and I do like the player as a whole. Other than that, we have Chelsea to move in for Hato. Chelsea are considering making a move for Ajax defender Joel Hato, as called by Ben Jacobs, one of the several defensive targets who like the fact that Hato can play left back or in the center of defense, which I agree with. I think the versatility is something that we need because we need Cucurella depth, but we also need Colwill depth. Obviously, Badiashile can do that, but how often is he really fit? I think Hato, pretty much slides in and becomes a perfect backup option for both left back and center back position. So I would definitely make a move for him. Other than that, we talked about Hato yesterday. That's why I'm not really talking about it all too much because it's just reiterating the Ben Jacobs article, which was from yesterday, where we made initial approaches to Ajax. But yeah, I do want Hato through the door, and I do think every point that was made by Bobby Vincent was correct. I do think his versatility is something that we really should value and really go in for, especially if it's around that 40 million pound mark. But other than that, we have the Strasbourg loan update, which is the last thing we're talking about. That Mike Penders is set to become the new Strasbourg goalkeeper on loan, and then also Kendry Pies is off to Strasbourg on loan. So yeah, that is everything. I tried to kind of speed through it just because there was so much to talk about, and I didn't want there to be like a 25-minute news video for no reason. So yeah, that is everything. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, it's Repulse, and I'm out. Peace.